Welcome back to the Get Off the Treadmill podcast for small business owners and entrepreneurs, where we show you how to build a successful business and to have a life too. We're going to dive into another topic that helps us make more money in less time and to get off the treadmill so we can experience a life of significance. And now, your host and the author of the #1 best-selling business book, Making Money is Killing Your Business, Chuck Blakeman.
Hi, and welcome back. I'm Chuck Blakeman, and today we're going to talk about the emerging work world of the participation age and the idea of rehumanizing the workplace by giving everybody their brain back. In 2014, TEDx sought me to do a talk in Denver, Colorado, in front of a live audience of almost 3,000 people. It was a real honor. If you're on YouTube watching this, I'll show you a link to that talk. It's about 15 minutes and gives you another view of what I'm going to talk about today. Before that TED Talk, I used to do 60 to 90-minute presentations and sometimes 3-hour workshops on this idea of the participation age. And when they said I would have 18 minutes, I way too quickly declared I would take only 15 to share what I normally shared in 1 to 3 hours. Giving the 15-minute talk was pretty easy, but figuring out how to reduce a few hours of video and content to just 15 minutes was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. But as with every one of the TED Talks, the 15 minutes was enough to capture every big idea worth sharing around what we call the emerging work world or the participation age. I didn't coin that term, which is one of the many reasons I like it. If you can find other people who are expressing your idea and glom onto the term that's already being used, it shows you're not making something up to sell on the internet, and it will have much quicker adoption. I first heard the term the participation age because I was selling branding services for a friend of mine while I ran my own marketing company as well. In 2006, we were invited to Silicon Valley by Sun Microsystems, which is now Oracle, to accept the Global Marketing Partner of the Year award, a great honor for a very small company in Colorado. While we were there at that 2-day conference, someone from Wired magazine talked briefly about their observation that we were moving into what he called the participation age. And I knew instantly that everything I was researching, hearing, feeling, and experiencing around the direction work should be taking in the modern world fit really well into that description. Every previous age had been named for stuff and things like, rocks, useful metals, smokestacks, technology. The biggest problem I saw with all those is that they ignored the only reason we were able to identify those ages. They ignored the people who made that age what it was. And in today's world, it's perfect timing to finally name an age for people. And especially because hierarchies and authoritarianism and oppression and dictatorships and other top-down influences in the world have been deeply challenged from the 1960s on forward. People no longer want to be a tiny, inconsequential speck in a giant corporate machine. Everybody wants to be seen, heard, and felt, and to know they are playing a meaningful role in life, where they don't just make money, but they make meaning too. They want to participate in building a better workplace and to be recognized and rewarded for that participation. So it's about time we recognize the ascendance of the human being as the most impactful species on our planet with a deep desire to live in community with each other. Participating together to build the present and the future of work is precisely what we see emerging around us as the industrial age and the factory systems that grew up around it begin to rust and fall away. Since 2006, I have observed the emerging work world of the participation age as it slowly gains traction and acceptance around the world. Just as importantly, I have delighted in watching how every business that adopts the principles, practices, and tools of the participation age consistently do better by every common metric used to measure successful companies: growth, revenue, profitability, productivity, efficiency, effectiveness, and exponentially higher retention of people who are finally getting credit for their part in building a great company. In 2014, I also wrote a book about what we had been teaching companies to do since the early 2000s around participation age companies, titled Rehumanizing the Workplace by Giving Everybody Their Brain Back. We'll throw a URL up for that as well. You can buy it on Amazon, and it expands on some of the ideas we're talking about here. Today, I invite you to join me in a series of podcasts around this idea of the participation age, starting with this one that shares the basic principles and practices of the participation age, And in about a dozen more podcasts, we will apply those principles and practices as business tools by sharing what we call the 12 tools of distributed decision making. These are the tools companies use to transform their old industrial age operating systems into a fully mature participation age approach to work. So let's get started. First, with the principles and practices of the emerging work world of the participation age. So what is the participation age? We'll profile a lot of companies who are modeling this, but first let's describe it. There are two hallmarks of the P age, or the participation age, that separates it from every past organizational structure, or what we call operating systems. The first hallmark of the P age is that participation. People want to participate in building a great organization, not for you, but with you. And the second hallmark follows on the first, which is sharing. People want to share in the rewards of building that great organization, not just monetarily, but in recognition in other ways as well. This new structural emphasis on participation and sharing is a tectonic shift from what the industrial age factory system gave us in the way of organizational governance. We have to address this factory system because sadly, the overwhelming majority of today's companies are still running on that antiquated operating system, with guys in ties sitting in boardrooms giving top-down commands to drive bottom-up results. This was a bad idea when factories made it common, and it's a worse idea today. But change is hard, and we all want to see the next person adopt something before we try it. So, ironically, the tech industry is probably the most entrenched in the factory system, top-down hierarchy of management more than any other industry in today's world. I had a very short engagement with Google, who asked me to come in and consult on how to develop a new operating system for Google internationally, a new organizational structure. It was short, in my opinion, because of their slavish adherence to the top-down factory system management model. And having worked with companies like Apple, Microsoft, Hewlett-Packard, Oracle, and many other tech giants, I've observed they are all continuously putting lipstick on the factory system pig. They just can't get rid of it. They all know it's not working, but only a minority in that industry have moved into the emerging work world of the participation age. And the same goes for every industry and profession. Most of them are still struggling to join the emerging work world. But the good news is that you can find examples in every industry and even in government where organizations have jettisoned the old guys and ties top-down approach to join the participation age. And those participation age companies all live at the top of their industries in every enviable metric: growth, revenue, profit, productivity, customer satisfaction, and team member retention. Now that we've established the two hallmarks of the participation age, participation and sharing, let's unpack what it looks like for a company wanting to move into the modern world with a modern organizational operating system. First, in a PH company, there is company-wide aversion to imposed hierarchy. The companies we'll highlight have business models with little or no emphasis on hierarchy, and usually with no imposed hierarchy. This isn't to say there is no hierarchy, but there is an aversion to imposing it on people. Hierarchy, if it develops at all, comes about naturally based on skills and talents, and it is not seen or used as a power pyramid. If you strand 30 people on an island, inside of a couple of days, an organic hierarchy will emerge because somebody's good at chopping down trees, somebody else is the best at designing a boat, others are better at building it, others are better at hunting and gathering, others might be better at encouraging people, others might be better at giving vision. You get the idea. In a participation age company, hierarchy is not imposed, it evolves from the edges in based on who is good at what, not who has more power. An example of this is W.L. Gore, the makers of the line of Gore-Tex weatherproof fabrics. They don't impose a CEO on its workers like most companies still do with the outdated factory system model. Instead, all of the company team members vote on who they want as CEO. They aren't even given a list of names to choose from. And since the 1960s, W.L. Gore has consistently shown up in the top rankings of its industry in every category. At Gore, as with all participation age companies, no one has a boss, and there's no corporate ladder to climb. Managers don't exist. Let me say that again. Hard to swallow, hard to figure out. Hundreds of large companies, thousands of small ones are doing this. Managers don't exist. But that's okay because managers don't make decisions in these companies. Teams make decisions. Teams divide up the responsibilities that used to belong to a single powerful manager, and they self-manage better than any manager could possibly have managed them within the limits of one person's abilities. Again, hierarchy is not non-existent, but it is organic, not imposed. Becoming a leader in a participation age company is a result of people seeing who is good at what and placing them in those roles. And since there are no managers, no one person can hire and fire. Teams hire and fire. So power dynamics are greatly dispersed instead of being concentrated in a classic top-down power struggle in a hierarchy where everyone is scratching and clawing to get to the top by sucking up to the next person who's on top of them. So that's one attribute of a participation age company. There's almost no, and many times no, imposed hierarchy. It comes about organically, if at all. A second attribute of a participation age company is that it's not manager-centered or boss-centered. It is mission-centered. What does that mean? Allegiance is to the mission, not to bosses or departments. A good mission statement describes the result the company wants their customer to have, and that becomes the manic obsession of everyone at the company, taking priority over power dynamics and privilege that traditionally comes with rank and departments competing with each other and all that other political nonsense. If someone wants to do something, they don't ask the boss. They first ask the mission statement. Will this thing I'm about to do help us accomplish our mission? And then they get buy-in and agreement from the rest of the team or multiple teams or even the whole company, depending on the breadth and depth of the impact of the potential decision. I've seen CEOs stand up in front of a whole company of, say, 300 people, tell the company they have just fired themselves as the boss, and then told everyone their new boss, which is also his boss, is the mission statement. And that this is the boss that will hire, this is the boss that will fire, with the agreement of the team members impacted by those decisions. In one day, I've seen factory system hierarchy dismantled as the focus is redirected to the mission statement as the boss. So that's the second attribute, mission statement as boss. A third attribute of a participation age company is a completely overhauled description of what a worker is. We no longer call them employees because it's too long to get into it right now, but that word is so damaged, you can't rehabilitate it. We like to call people stakeholders. Some people call them team members or associates, but you got to stop calling people employees because it is such a put down. Stakeholders are mature adults who think like owners and require leadership, but not management. Two very different things. We'll get into that as well. They focus on meaningful work and relationships, not titles, promotions, and competition. On the other hand, the term employee has its roots in factories where the average person was under 10 years old, where we were all told to shut up, sit down, don't ask questions, live invisibly, and go out quietly with a gold watch. Employees are like children at work. They check their brains at the door on the way in because they know that the game is to wait for the manager to tell them what to do. Employees are human doings. Stakeholders are human beings. In the emerging work world of the participation age, the knowledge economy is founded on inviting everyone to bring their whole, messy adult person to work and to participate in making the decisions that they're going to have to carry out without a specific person or manager having to tell them what to do. Teams of stakeholders guide each other. We'll have a podcast on the difference between employees and stakeholders as well to flesh that out. Another attribute of a participation age company is how very differently decisions are made. We call it distributed decision making, where decisions are made locally, where they will be carried out not by guys in ties and ivory towers, and not even by localized managers, but by the teams that will execute the decisions, always with the input of leaders who make sure the localized decisions are good for the whole company, not just the local team. If the decision isn't going to be good for the whole company, they ask the team to try again. They don't make the decision for them. They say, go back and try again. Come up with a decision that works for all of us. DDM, distributed decision making, eliminates the needs for managers who used to be the only decision maker. Now in a team of 8 people, instead of having a manager, there aren't any. There's 2 or 3 or more of them that might carry out some of the traditional responsibilities of a manager, and everyone is involved in decisions that used to be made by the manager. No one person can make a decision and impose it on others. Again, imposed hierarchy is gone and replaced with organic functional hierarchy or just functions. We'll do a podcast on this to show in detail how well this idea of distributed decision making works and how it works with what we call two steps, just two-step distributed decision making, and how much faster and better decisions are made by teams than by any one manager. Another attribute of a participation age company goes hand in hand with DDM, and that is distributed leadership. While there are no managers in a participation age company, everyone is seen as having some form of leadership. People need to be led, they don't need to be managed. We manage stuff, we don't manage people. So the mantra is manage stuff, lead people. And people use their expertise to lead people in different ways, like solving problems, encouraging others, creating initiatives, building systems, forming teams, being in production. There's lots of ways to lead. As with the 30 people on an island, people organically end up in whatever form of leadership works best for them and for the organization. It has to work for both. Distributed leadership breaks down into two main categories: strategic leadership and tactical leadership. And then these leadership types live on a continuum between those two categories. Some people might have a toe in both styles. Others are focused on only one. Again, we'll have a podcast specifically dedicated to the idea of distributed leadership and how it is a legitimate need to see every single person in a company as contributing in some form of leadership. Another attribute follows naturally from distributed decision-making and distributed leadership, what we call distributed decision-making teams or DDM teams. Since no managers exist in a participation age company, DDM and distributed leadership become the daily practice of every team. So every team or work group is now a DDM work group. All teams, all work groups in a participation age organization adopt the DDM team or DDM work team structure. We'll show what it looks like in a lot of companies and how it is so much more successful than imposing managers over work groups. DDM teams are the foundation of the participation age operating system, replacing top-down imposed hierarchy with decisions made locally where the decisions will be carried out. Again, never in a vacuum, always in collaboration with the others in the company, but never imposed. We'll do a podcast dedicated to DDM teams as well. And I want to insert here quickly that some people might be seeing this as chaos. Hey, there's no managers. How do you do this? I don't have time to say everything right now, but I can guarantee you as we walk through this, you'll see that there is less chaos, more organization, more structure, more productivity, better everything in a company without managers than when we have managers present. Blows your mind, but all the research is showing that this is true. And another attribute of a participation age organization is principles, not bureaucracy. Instead of a long list of do's and don'ts defined by a thick employee manual, a participation age company trusts in adult behavior and simply outlines the values, vision, mission, and the guiding few principles that define who we are and how we work together. See, leadership is based on principles. Management is based on bureaucracy and policies. We don't want policies, we don't want management, we want leadership. We believe people are adults and we give them the right principles, and then in teams they collaborate together. They will come up with the right tools and the right practices to reflect those principles. One such company, Semco, has a very short stakeholder success guide that lays out, I think it's like 10 principles, and they do it by using cartoons and a short phrase under each cartoon. And it's brilliant. And people use it all the time to figure out what it is I should be doing. They don't need to know how to dress. The principle for how to dress is in those 10 principles. This company is one of the most successful in its industry over the last 50 years as a participation age company. We'll have a lot of fun showing how principles are so much better as a guide than any employee manual or policies or bureaucracy, ironically ending up in much less confusion, fewer lawsuits, and exponentially higher compliance. Just the opposite of what you might think. Again, not chaos, better organization by everyone instead of by the few. One of the principles that defines this whole idea of principles, not bureaucracy, is that when you treat people like adults, they start acting like it. All right, so these are a few of the main attributes of the participation age company. There are more, but this gets us started. Over the next dozen or so podcasts, we'll lay out the 12 tools of distributed decision making to show how participation age companies function so successfully and so regularly at the top of their industries or professions. And we'll also profile many organizations that exemplify the emerging work world of the participation age. These organizations all function at the top of their professions or industries, and all of them do so without the factory system top-down hierarchy we were taught is the only way to manage an organization even today. Some of these companies originally employed classic factory system hierarchies, which they dismantled as they transitioned to become participation age companies. Other organizations we will look at were born without imposed hierarchy, no day-to-day managers from the beginning, and fully distributed decision-making. But all these companies share the above attributes in common that help them rehumanize the workplace by giving everybody their brain back. Okay, so this upcoming series of podcasts may be a trapeze moment for you. Whether you are employed by others and you want to get out of a top-down factory system environment, or you own a company and you want to make this change, or you're in strategic leadership in some form and you can actually impact change. If you run a business or feel like you're stuck in a job with no soul, you may have a decision to make. There are a few dozen giant corporations already, hundreds of big ones, and tens of thousands of small to medium-sized corporations racing to embrace the participation age or who are already there. Don't settle. Find one you can join as a stakeholder or build one yourself. In the upcoming podcasts, we'll show you how. The emerging work world is waiting for you. Please come join us in the participation age.
That wraps up another episode of the Get Off the Treadmill podcast. If you found this podcast helpful, please subscribe and hit the like button to ensure you are receiving the latest tools you need to grow your business and to get off the treadmill. If you want more information on the 3 to 5 Club, the Crankset Group, or to book Chuck as a business advisor, speaker, or workshop leader, you can contact us at grow@cranksetgroup.com. Until next time, have a great week.